The exercise files for today's course are located in the video description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Joe. I'm going to be facilitating this course for you today. And today we're talking about the top tips and tricks for Excel. Excel is one of my favorite applications, and we are going to get through some of those top tips and tricks like flash fill all the way up until XLOOKUP. So stay tuned for some fun and let's get right into it. All right, welcome everyone. So right now we're going to go over one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts for selecting data. How many of you out there have ever done something like this, where you click through the data, you're dragging through, and oops, you go a little too far? Yeah, it happens to the best of us. But I'm going to show you a trick and a keyboard shortcut that will have you never doing that ever again. The first thing we have to learn is the keyboard shortcut itself. And that's going to be the Control key plus the Shift key plus the arrow keys. Now I say the arrow keys because it really depends on which way you're going, left, right, up, or down. And we can select the cells to the next empty cell using this keyboard shortcut. So for instance, if I want to select all of the salary numbers, I can click the first iteration of it, which is D3, and I can then use Control Shift down arrow. And it's going to select all of the data to the next empty cell. Now, if you did have data, you had maybe an empty cell here, and then you had data continuing, you could then use Control Shift down arrow to go to the next as well. So no worries if you do have blanks within your data, you can still use this keyboard shortcut. And the reason why I say arrow keys is because let's say that I want to only select the first row here, I can do Control Shift right arrow, and it brings me there, or Control Shift down arrow to select everything. This works really well, especially if you're using conditional formatting, because, well, conditional formatting does not like when you select headers. Typically, it doesn't work well. So if you don't want to use Control A, because Control A will select all the data, you just want to select the data, you can use that keyboard shortcut. Control Shift down arrow, Control Shift right arrow, and we selected all of the data. I hope this really helps you, but yeah, try it out on your own. The next thing we're going to talk about is flash fill. And once again, this is one of my favorite features. It allows you to manipulate data really quickly and with ease. The way that we can do this is, let's say that we have the first name and the last name here. And we decide that we want to concatenate it or combine it to a full name. Now, some of you have probably done this before using concat. And we have a function equals concat that will combine those two strings of text together. But what happens if I told you it'd be easier to actually use flash fill? Well, watch this. Let me give you an example. The first thing you have to do is give Excel an example of what you want. So for instance, I want the full name. I'll just type John Doe. I'll then press enter. Now there's a couple ways to do this. You can either start typing out the next example and it will autofill all of it for you, just like that. Or another way to do this is once you click into the next cell, you can go to the data tab. And inside of that data tab, you'll see under the data tools, flash fill. Kind of looks like that little lightning bolt from Harry Potter. Yes, Harry Potter, so that you can remember it. So as you can see here, that's our flash fill. And if you hover over it, you'll even notice it has a keyboard shortcut. So it's going to be Control E. So I'm going to give it the first example, click into the next cell, and use Control E, and that's it. It takes the first example. It says, okay, Joe, we see what you're doing. You're taking the first name, putting a space, and the last name. We'll do it for you for the rest of them. Now, the only way this works is if the data is next to each other. For instance, I couldn't just come over here and do a first name column and hope for it to work. It would say it doesn't know what I'm talking about. So just keep that in mind. So let me show you more powerful things that I can do. I'm going to delete out all the data, and let's say that I want to do the last name, comma, first initial. Just give the example. Last name, comma, space, first initial is J. I press enter, and then I use Control E. And there we go. It follows the pattern all the way down. And I can continue to do things like this. Maybe I want to do just the initials, J, D. press enter, Control E, and boom. Once again, it works beautifully. But it's not only just about combining things together like a full name, it's also about being able to data mine, pull data from data that already exists. For instance, we have here this date of hire, and maybe for some reason we need the year of hire. Maybe we're ordering shirts for the company's anniversary, and we need to put the back of the date of hire on the back of the shirt, something like that. Well, what we can do is we can click into our first cell here, type out what we want. What do we want? Just simply the year. Press enter, Control E, and boom. You might notice something though. It didn't work the way we wanted it to. Well, that's because if we look at this column and we take a look at the Home tab, we can see that it's automatically the date. So if this happens to you, no worries. Just put no specific format and it's going to work beautifully. You're going to select all of them, make sure you choose general for all of them, and then you're going to try that again. So I'll do that one more time here. I'm just going to select everything, clear this out. We'll put in our first date, that's what we want, 2020, press enter, and then use Control E, and it worked beautifully. So if that does happen to you, no worries, don't be nervous. A lot of times what happens is you'll probably autofill over, and that's why it's going to carry over the formatting. Just remember to change it back to general, and it'll work beautifully for you. That, or you can also use the year function. But once again, with the year function, you're putting in a function with a result. Here you're actually getting data, just the actual data. Now, besides being able to just pull out a year from a date, we can also split things apart, like location. Now you'll see here that we have the location all together, but maybe we want to split it through all these different columns. Now I know what you're saying, Joe, I've seen this before. You go to data, and we can use the text to columns in the data tools. And yes, that does work well. The only thing that I say there is I don't like the wizard. And no, I'm not talking about Harry Potter this time. I'm talking about when you click on text to columns, it's going to open up a wizard that looks something like this. And you'll see step 1 to step 3. I don't want to go through all that. You got to pick a delimiter. All you simply have to do is use flash fill. What's the city? Well, New York. Press enter, Control E, and I'm done. What's the state? New York. Press enter, Control E, you're done. What's the zip code? 10001. Press enter, Control E, you're done. Now you might have noticed something though. First off, our states didn't come over perfectly, and neither did our zip codes. We're missing some of those leading zeros. You will run into this once in a while, and that's okay. I'll show you how to fix it. First off, when we do New York, it thinks automatically that it's following the pattern of stealing the N from here and the Y from here. That's why it says LA, it's stealing the L and the A. And then it only sees Chicago, so it's like, oh, the C, the H. It thinks it's taking it from these columns here. That's not what we want. So what we can do instead is we can give it more examples. It's okay to give FlashFill more examples. The first thing I'm going to do is delete this all out. We're going to click into state, and we're going to do NY. We're going to press enter, and we're going to do CA. That way now we're telling FlashFill that we want to follow this pattern, New York and California. We can then press enter again, use Control E, and you'll see it fixes the issue. For the issue for the leading zeros, this tends to be a common problem. Excel doesn't like having leading zeros unless it's formatted that way. So all you need to do here is select your zip codes. I'll use my keyboard shortcut that we learned the first time, Control Shift down arrow. I'm going to right click and I'll select Format Cells, because format means change the appearance of the cell. Right now, if we look at the formatting for these, by clicking Format Cells, it's going to tell us it's in a general format. And that's not what we want. We want the zip code format. And yes, there's actually a zip code format. There's also a social security format and a telephone format. You can find them under the special category, and you'll see zip code plus the 4 digits, phone number, social security number. Pick whichever one makes sense, and also pick your location. I'll pick the zip code. It already says United States, and click OK. And take a look at this one right here where it's the 2101. Once I click OK, it'll have the leading 0. And there it is. So if you ever have issues with zip codes, always remember there's a format for zip codes. Now we have this looking great, and as you can see, this was pretty quick to get done. If you ever run into those little issues there, now you know how to troubleshoot them as well. I'll see you in our next example. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. The next thing we're talking about today is data validation. This is, and you've probably heard me say it, another great tool that I love in Excel. It allows us to force data to be selected. And the reason why it forces it is so that we can validate that the data going into our data sets is accurate. There's nothing worse than somebody filling out a form and putting inaccurate data that we later need to fix. So by forcing them to put in the correct data, that will allow us to essentially have better looking data. Let's take this service form, for example, and let's showcase what could happen if we just allowed them to fill out anything. Michael Lee could say, okay, I'm going to put in today's date, and they might do something like this. And they don't mean to, they just accidentally slipped on the keyboard. We then have the service received. And they're like, well, what service did I receive? It was a repair. I think it was something repairs. Service rep. Oh, I know who I had. I had Rob. And best contact number to get me by. So let's go with my best number here. Okay, we're good to go. The problem is a couple of things here. Because we're not validating the data, they put in the incorrect year. They just put in a random service received, which this might not match our data that we're trying to gather. They put in Rob instead of Robert or even Rob. And also added an extra digit for the best contact number. Now this happens sometimes, but to actually reduce the margin of error, we're going to use data validation. So I'm just going to clear these out, and we're going to go through all the different types of data validation that will help us to force the correct data. So first off, where is data validation located? Well, since we're talking about data, it's going to be in the Data tab. And in that Data tab, we're going to go over to the Data Tools over here, and that's where you'll find data validation. That little icon there kind of looks like a green check mark and a red deny sign, and we're going to give it a click. It's going to populate this dialog box, and right now it's saying that whatever cell we have selected, any value is allowed there. So I'm going to cancel this out because it's important to note that you want to select all of the cells that you want to affect. Select to affect. So I'm going to select from B5 to B10, and then I'm going to click on data validation. That way it's affecting all of these cells at once, and I don't have to do it individually. So right now, anything's allowed in there. A number, a date, a function, a string of text, whatever I want. But we don't want that. We want to actually force something. What do we want to force? A date. So you'll see here we can force a whole number, a decimal number, a list of data, a date, a time, a text length, or even customize our own. So I'm going to say here that I want to do, let's do a date, and then we can even choose data between. Now, if you want to do between, let's say, one date to another, you'll use between. If you want the date to be greater than or equal to, or greater than or equal to, or greater than, or not equal to, or equal to, whatever the comparison operator you want, you can use. Now, I'm going to just say that I know for a fact that this service form was given from January to February. So I'm going to say between, and I'm going to choose the two dates. I'll say 1/1/2023. And then the end date we can say is, let's say on the 25th we ended it, 2/25/2023. Now that we have this, we can click OK, and we have to enter in dates between those two times. If I enter in a date that's not there, like let's say 5/31/2023, it's going to say that it doesn't match my validation. Now, I don't like this message. We can actually create our own customized messages. So just reselect B5 to B10. We're going to go back to data validation. And after you choose the actual rule that you're creating, or the validation criteria, you can then also do an input message to let people know exactly what you want, and an error message just in case they don't listen to your validation. Let's start with the input message. Let's tell people that they need to pick a date between January 1st to February 25th. So I'm going to say, please select date between, and you can put this any way that you want. I'll say between January 1st, 2023 to February 25th, 2023. So now we're giving them some direction, and it's always good to do an input message. Next, we'll do an error message, and it's important to note that these error messages will appear and stop them from actually continuing if it says stop. But if you select warning, or if you select information, it will just give them a warning sign or an information sign with whatever text you have in there, but it will allow them to continue to make the error. Only the stop one will make them stop and re-input the information until it's valid. So keep that in mind that we want to use stop here. We'll then put in a message and just say, not a valid date selection. And you can put whatever you want here. Now I'm going to click OK. And once they click in there, you'll see, please select the date between January 1st, 2023 to February 25th, 2023. You can quickly put in a false one to see if this is working okay. Press enter. And now it gives our custom message saying not a valid date selection. So I'll retry. And let's do 2/15/2023. And it accepts it. So right now we are forcing a date, which is beautiful. It's working nice. We have our error code. We have information so that they know what to actually do. And we have our actual criteria. Next, we want to go to the service received. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to simply make a list. And this list is going to be custom. It doesn't matter what we put in here. It's going to be a list of items that we create. So the first thing you always want to do is select to effect. I'm going to select from C5 to C10. I'll then go over to my data validation, and I'll see that right now, if we go to settings here, anything's allowed in there. But what I want to put in there is an actual list of data. So I'm going to click the drop-down and choose list. Now for this list, all you need to do is put the items and separate them by a comma. So I'm just going to say something like this: new hardware, new software, repair. That's fine. I think only those three are good. We'll put in the input message. We'll just say select option from list. And then we can even put in an error alert saying not a valid selection. We'll click OK, and let's see if it works. We get a little drop down, select option from list. And yeah, it works beautifully. New hardware, software, repair. We can choose which one makes sense to us. And if somebody tries to enter in like custom and says hello or something, it's going to say not a valid selection. It'll make you retry. So they have to select one of these items from the list. Now we're going to do the same thing for our service rep, except instead of creating the list ourselves, we already have a list of service reps over here on the side. What I want to do is, instead of having to put all the work into type out their names, what I can do is I could just select the list as a reference. That way it creates a list of data based off of this list here. So to do that, same thing, we're going to select from D5 to D10. We'll go over to data validation. We'll then put in our settings, which we want to create a list again. This time our source, though, is not going to be something we create. It's going to be from G5 through G8. We'll put in our input message, which will be the same. Just select from list of reps, error alert, not a valid selection, and we'll click OK. Now we'll see select from list of reps. We'll select anyone here, Rachel, make that a little bigger, and there we go. And the best part about it is if something changes, Let's say Rachel gets married. Maybe Rachel gets married to me. Now in the list, it's updated, so we can reselect the new name. So that's one of my favorite things about creating these lists is we can create them from scratch, or you're more than welcome to actually select them from a list that already exists. The next data validation that I'm going to show you is going to be a customized one. Let's say that we want to force a phone number. Well, the first thing we need to do is let Excel know that this is going to be a phone number. So we're going to select from E5 to E10, and we're going to do the same thing we did at the last exercise. We're going to right click, we're going to go to Format Cells, and if you remember the last exercise, we decided that we needed a special category, and we used zip code. Well, in this case, it's a phone number. So I'm going to choose phone number, and I'm going to click OK. So now Excel knows that any numbers that go in here will look like a phone number. Even if I just put a bunch of numbers here, it automatically gives it that look of a phone number, which I love. So that's the first step. I'll just delete that out. Now, when it comes to custom data validation, it's important to note that you cannot select all of them like we've been doing. That's only for if you use data validation that's predefined, like whole number, decimal, list, date, time, text length. If you're doing a custom, most likely that means that you're going to write a formula. So you're going to have to reference the formula. So for instance, I'm going to select E5 only in this case. Once you select E5, we'll go about the same way. We're going to click data validation. And this time we're going to force a custom criteria. Now, the formula I'm using, I'm actually going to nest two functions inside of an AND function. And if you want, you're more than welcome to use this in any of your personal work files. But for me, I'm going to just showcase what it does. I'm going to use two functions called the len function and isNumber function. This is going to force it to look, is this a number? Because we don't want someone just writing any text in there because it's a phone number. So it's going to check if it's a number, and then it's also going to check the length of a number. Now, the American length of a number is going to be 10 digits. For every other location, it's always going to be different, so you'll just really tweak this formula to be yours. So for me, it's going to be 10 digits. For you, it might be 11 or 12. Now, the first thing we have to do is ask two questions, which means if you want to ask two questions, we have to use the AND, because we're asking, is it a number, and is the length equal to 10? So I'm going to start off my formula using an AND, and I'm going to say is number, and I'm going to put E5. And all that's doing is checking if E5 is a number. I'll then put my comma, and I'm going to start my next function, which is my len. I'm going to say, is the len of E5 equal to 10? So I'm asking these two questions now. I'm asking, is whatever's in E5 a number? And is the length of that number 10? If it's not a number, and if the length isn't 10, well, then it's going to give them an error. If it is a number, and it is a length of 10, then it's going to be valid. So now that I have this looks great. I'm going to put in an input message and just type, please enter valid phone number. And then the error alert will just be not a valid phone number. I'll then click OK, and let's see if it works. I'll put in an extra 0. It's going to say not a valid phone number. That worked. Now we're going to do a normal number, and it works beautifully. How awesome is that? With that said, that is our data validation. We've now seen how we can force a date, how we can create a list from scratch, or a list from a list that already existed, or even force a phone number. We talked a little bit about data mining back when we were in FlashFill. Now I'm going to showcase a couple more techniques to grab data that may not be present at the moment, but still lies in our data. It's known as metadata, information about information that already exists. So you can see here that I have this payroll information. And maybe what I want to do is I want to grab a couple more things that can be very useful in other types of visualizations, or even being able to create graphs or just analyze the data in general. So to do this, I'm going to decide what I want. And the first thing I probably want from this data set is the gross pay. I have the hours that are worked per week, and I also have what the hourly rates are for each employee. So it'd be a good idea to see how much gross pay they make weekly. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another column here, and I'm just going to autofill this header right over. I'll adjust it, and I'm just going to rename it gross pay. Next up, I'm going to write a function, and I'm just going to do a simple formula here. I'm going to do equals, and I'm going to select from H4 and multiply that using my asterisk by I4 and press enter. Of course, I don't want to have to do that for all this data because there's a lot of data here, so I will be utilizing my autofill. And that autofill handle is going to be in the bottom right-hand corner there. And once you hover over that, you'll see that your white crosshaired cursor will turn into a black crosshaired cursor. Once there, you can either click and drag, or if there is data living to the left of this data set or to the right, you can then just do a quick double click. So I'm going to do that because I have data to the left there. I'll double click, and there we go. We have our gross pay. Now I'm not done because I also want more information. Maybe I want the year of hire next, because who knows, I could use that for statistics, right? I could say how many people have we hired in 2004 versus 2010, and we can see that trend. So I'm going to create another column here. Let's call this one year of hire. And to get the year of hire, we've already seen that flash fill can do this. Or you can do equals, and you can use the year function. It's really up to you on how you want to grab this. If you use the year function, once again, what's really living in this cell is a function. So if you're trying to do like calculations later on, it might not come over so authentically. So what I want to do is I want to just actually pull this using flash fill so that it's an actual value. Otherwise, you would have to copy it, right click, and just paste it as a value. And I don't want to have to go through that since I could just use flash fill regardless. Let's do that. I'm going to grab 2006, press enter, and then use Control E. And there you go. I get all of the years. The next thing I want to do is grab the month of hire. For the same reason I have the year of hire. I want to see how many people I hire in, let's say, December versus June. So I'm going to grab the month of hire. And once again, you're more than welcome to either autofill like this, or if you wanted to, what you can also do is just type out what you want. I'm going to do month of hire. And it will automatically copy that format since it's right next to the data. So now that I have the month of hire, we could use what's known as the month function, right? And once again, that's going to give me something that looks like this. It's going to give me that 12. We can also just pull that 12 if we wanted to using our flash fill. We could put a 12, press enter, and use Control E. But what happens if we don't want to look at the data like this? Maybe we don't want numeric data, we want a string of data, which means that you want, instead of a 12 here, you want it to say December, whether it's abbreviated or non-abbreviated. In that case, we can't use flash fill and we can't use month. The month function will always return a numeric value. So instead, we're going to use another type of function. The function I'm going to showcase is known as the text function. Now, the way the text function works is it takes a numeric value and it turns it to a string of text. But it really depends on the built-in arguments that you want. So we're going to walk through a list of arguments that we can use for the text function. So the first thing that I want to do here is, let's say that I want the month. And let's say I want the month from a random date. We'll use my birthday because why not? My birthday's awesome, right? So we'll say 7/22, and then we'll put in this year that's coming up. Now, if I was to grab, using the text function, if I wanted to grab the month here, I would actually use a D. And what that would do is grab a day. If I wanted a month, I would use an M. If I do just an M, that's going to give me a 7. I can also grab MM, which would give me a 07. So instead of just giving me one digit, it gives me 2. Now, of course, if it's already a 2-digit, like anything like October, November, December, which is 10, 11, 12, even if you have just one M, it's going to give you 10, 11, or 12 because it's automatically 2 digits. But for single digits like July here, we have 0, 7. Now, where the text function starts to break it from a numeric value to a string of text is when we use more than 2 M's. If we do 3 M's, it's going to do the abbreviated version of the month. And if we do, you guessed it, more than 3 M's, it will give us the entire month, not abbreviated. Same thing here, we can also do days, which is pretty amazing. If I wanted to pull the day, for instance, if I do D, that will give me 22. Because once again, it follows that same suit. If it was a single digit, it'd be single digit. If I do DD, it's going to be 22 as well. If I do 3 Ds, it'll give me the non-abbreviated version, or the abbreviated version of whatever day that is, and I believe it's a Saturday. And then we can also do the non-abbreviated version, which is the full Saturday, just like that. So really it depends on what you want. You're going to select the date, and then you're going to put your comma, and the next argument will be what type of text do you want. So let's try it out. What I want to do here is I want to pull the month. So I'm going to do equals. I'm going to type out text, tab on my keyboard to open up that parentheses. I'm going to select where I want to pull the date from. So that's going to be F4 in this case. Put my comma, and then what format of the text do I want? So I'll showcase all of them. I'll just do M, and it's going to give me 12 because once again, that single double digit. I'll double click in there. I'll add another M. It'll give me 12 again. I'll click back in there, put another M, and now it's going to give me the abbreviated form of December. And I'll click back in there, do a 4th M, and it will give me non-abbreviated December. And now what I can do is double click, and there we go, all the way down. If you use the month function, that will give you numeric value. If you use the text function, it can give you both. Now that we have a little bit of an idea of month of hire, let's actually switch gears and let's talk about if we wanted to pull data that might not be so clear. For instance, maybe I'm looking at this data and I want to pull out our full-time staff versus our part-time staff. Now that one's not so clear. How can we tell if somebody's full-time or part-time? Well, usually you'll see the hours. And for this case, we do have the hours here. So we can do some data mining to figure out if they're full-time or part-time. But in order to do this, we're going to have to use a very fun function called the if function. And what the if function does is it asks a question, and if that question is true, it does something. If it's false, it does something different. So depending on true or false, we get 2 different results. So for me, I'm thinking that's perfect because I want to analyze this number, and if it's greater than or equal to 36, then they're full-time staff. If it's less than 36, then it's going to be a part-time staff. So I'm going to create another column here. I'm just going to call it, let's do short. I don't want to write full-time, part-time. You could just do ft/pt. Now we're going to write our if function. Now, if you're new to writing functions, if you're like, Joe, I haven't really wrote a lot of functions, I'll show you a little trick that I use when I first started out with functions. You're going to type out the equal sign, put the function you want to use, the if, press tab on your keyboard, which is next to the Q, which will open up the parentheses. And once you're at this spot, you're going to move over to the formula bar and click on this FX here. What that's going to do is it's going to open up what's known as the function arguments box, also known as Joe's help box. I know I just made that up, but wouldn't it be cool if it said Joe's help box here? Anyway, we now have the if function. We have the logical test, which is the question. It'll even tell you what each of these are, the value if true and the value if false. You don't have to worry about commas when you're in here. That's why it's a little easier, so you don't put all the commas, you just fill in the boxes and click OK. So what is the question we're asking? Well, we're simply asking, is this number here, these hours, 35.5, greater than or equal to 36. So that's what we're going to put here. We're going to just simply click on the cell, H4. Is it greater than or equal to 36? Now it's saying it's false because it's at 35.5. So this person's actually part-time. But now's the easy part. What do we want to write if it was true? If it was true, we would write full-time or FT, whatever you like. But as you can see here, if I just write full-time like this, it's actually going to give me an error. The reason being is because, well, computers don't understand English. So essentially what we need to do is put it in a string of text. We can do that by putting our quote and quote. Once we put it in quotes like this, you'll see that it's now recognizing it. And if it was false, we would just simply write part-time. You'll know your formula is working well because in the formula result, it'll show you that result. So this is definitely not true. Since it's false, it's going to put part-time. Now we can click OK. Let's do that autofill so it saves us time. And there we go. We have our full-time versus part-time. So as you can see, there's so much more data that we could have gotten out of this data set, and we still can get more data. We've now received the gross pay, the year of hire, the month of hire, and even if they're full-time or part-time. This data right here can provide us with a lot of analysis. Just looking at certain data types, there's more that meets the eye to it. So have some fun with this, and we'll see you for the next section. One of the next things we're going to talk about is named ranges. Named ranges in Excel is one of my favorite things because it allows you to name a range of cells. Whether it's a single cell or it's a range of cells, you can name them and then reference them later. The best part about a named range is it's automatically absolute referenced, which means that when you add in those dollar signs, if you ever absolute reference something like this, you can always add in a dollar sign in front of the J or in front of the 2 here, and that's known as absolute reference so that you don't have to move the cells, right? It stays at this cell all the time. It's kind of like you're anchoring down the cell so it doesn't move. But instead of doing those dollar signs, we no longer have to worry about those with named ranges. So what's going to happen is this. I'm going to create a brand new column here, and I want to just simply see how much these sales reps made in bonus. So I'm just going to type out bonus, and I want to copy the formatting. So you're more than welcome to use the Home tab. Go over to the Clipboard command group and use Format Painter. Give that a click, and then you could copy the look of this and apply it to this. The next thing I want to do here is I want to start to see what the bonus is going to look like. And to do that, I'm going to come up here and use a bonus rate. So the bonus rate is going to be whatever that bonus rate is for the company, which we'll say 5%. I think that's a pretty good bonus rate. I may want to copy once again just the same looking format here. So I'm going to just copy the format from sales and apply it to the bonus rate. Now you'll see that it automatically pushes it like this. That's okay. If you want to keep the bonus rate looking like this, or if you want to just not merge and center it, you're still 5% here will be there. The only thing I need to do is just transfer that to a percentage, and you can either use the keyboard shortcut or just go to the Home tab, Numbers command group, and choose %. Once I do this, you'll see it says 5%, and now what I want to do is I want to multiply all of my sales times my bonus. So I can do equals sales times bonus. Now we know this isn't going to work well for us. When we press enter, yes, we do get the bonus amount. But the only problem is that I'm going to now try to autofill that and the rest are going to say 0 because we know we have to absolute reference or put the dollar signs in the I and the 1. Now, if I don't want to worry about that anymore, and I don't want to have to go by Excel's reference points, what I can do instead is I can name this range. So I'm going to click on I1. I'm going to go to the name box. And on the name box, all I need to do is just change it from I1 to whatever I want to name it. Now, the only requirement is that you do have no spaces. If you want to put a space, you can either use an underscore or you could just capitalize each word. So for instance, I can't write bonus space rate. It won't work right. I could just do bonus rate like this, or if you really wanted to, you can do underscore rate. So really up to you on how you want this to look. And I think that looks okay. Once you're done naming it, you press enter. And now I1 is forever known as bonus rate. If you click in J1, it's J1. If you click K1, it's K1. But if you click I1, it now says bonus rate instead. Now we can go to F3 to equals this cell multiplied by the bonus rate. It's now renamed. And when you press enter and you go to autofill, we'll click, it works beautifully. The last thing I may do here is just change this format. I don't really like the look of it, so I'll just copy and then apply the format here. And I think this is going to look great. And there we go. Done. So now it looks amazing. We have the bonus, and we don't need to worry about putting our dollar signs in. So how could this be helpful to us? Well, let's say that we also want to see how much sales we made per sales rep per, let's say, product. Well, if I want to do that, since it has a criteria, I can do what's known as a SUMIF function. Now, SUMIF functions are great. I can just say here who the sales rep is. I can say here what the product is, and I can say how much we made in sales. I'm going to just move this up top a little bit by clicking and dragging. You don't have to always use Control-C or Control-V. You could just click and drag up. I'm going to copy the look of this. There we go. It's starting to look really nice. And once again, I do want to change everything to look Calibri, so I'm going to select all these and just choose Calibri. I think that'll look good. And the last thing I need to do now, if I want this to work correctly, where I'll get the sales amount, I'm just going to add some borders here. And I'm going to take sales and I'm going to make it a different color. I'll just choose a cell style and make it green. That way I know that that's what I want the output to be. You could use output and input, but that's okay. I'm going to make these my input. And this is just a way to let people know what we're putting in and then what we're getting out. So now that I have this, I want to just create a SUMIF based off of these two things. Now the sales rep, let's just use Joe for example. For the product, let's say shoes. And if I want to see how much was totaled for Joe in shoes, I can do that by using a SUMIF. Now the SUMIF though only works with one criteria. So you'll notice that there's SUMIF and there's SUMIFs with an S. I'm going to use the SUMIFs with an S because there's two criteria, sales rep and product. The only thing I don't like about this is that what you're going to have to do is first select what you want to summarize, the sum range, which means what do you want to total up? Well, I want to total up the sales. Now you could use the trick I taught you before, which is Control-Shift-Down arrow, but you're going to have to do that all the time. And I don't want to do that. Instead, what I can do is I can name all of my ranges. So no longer do I have to click and select things. I could just name this entire column month, this entire column year, this one sales rep, and so on and so forth. So in order to do this, you're not going to have to rewrite everything by clicking on the name box like we did before with the bonus rate. Instead, there is an awesome feature in the Formulas tab where we can select an entire data set, go to Defined Names, and create all of the named ranges from that selection. So I'll select all of my data. You can use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control-A, or you can also just click on A2 and do Control-Shift-Right arrow, Control-Shift-Down arrow, and we'll select all our data. We'll then click Create from Selection, and it's going to open up this dialog box. It's going to say, okay, Joe, we're going to take all this data and make named ranges. But what do you want to name this? Like, what do you want to name this? Well, I want to name it bonus, which is in the top row. So we're going to create the names from the top rows. Make sure you deselect left column and only have top row selected. Then click OK. We now have this working beautifully for us. What we want to do next is we want to take the sales rep, product, sales, create this formula using some ifs. And now what is the sum range? Well, we want to calculate the sales. So now I could just type in sales. And you'll see here sales there. If you forgot the naming convention, no worries. There's a button here called Use in Formula, which can be found in the Formulas tab under the Define Names. And this will have all of your named ranges. So if I click on Named Ranges here, I'll see bonus, my bonus rate, category, division. I'll see all the different types of named ranges I have, including sales. And you'll see when you select sales, it highlights this entire column. So no longer do I have to select different arrays. Now I could just name them, name those ranges, and then start to utilize them. Next up, I'm going to finish off with what my criteria range 1 is. So what's my criteria? Sales rep. So I'll start typing sales rep, select it. What's the actual criteria? Well, I want to look for the word Joe, or the name Joe, in sales rep. What's the second criteria range? Well, that's going to be the product column. So I'm going to type in product. Now be careful here because if it's named like another function, you'll know the difference because the product is FX and product here has a different type of icon. So you'll just choose that one. The one that looks sort of like you could say table. Now that I have this, I can put a comma, select my second criteria. Where am I looking for shoes? I'm looking for it here. I can close this out by pressing enter, and I now get my total sales that Joe has made for shoes. You could just change the formatting, and I'll change that to currency. So Joe has sold $438,000 in shoes. How much did Paula sell in shoes? $343. How much did Kevin sell in shoes? Okay, $404. And if you remember, we did conditional formatting last time. So really what we could do here is mix the sum if with conditional formatting. We can go, instead of conditional formatting, let's do data validation here as well. We can say data validation. We're going to say that we want a list here. And the list is going to be Joe, Paula, Kevin, our 3 sales reps. I'll click OK. And then for the product itself, we can create another data validation. And we could say the data validation here is a list for shoes, pants, and shirts. That way we don't actually have to type it. And then we can create a conditional formatting for if there's anything that's less than a certain amount of sales, we can make it a certain color. So we're just mixing all the things we've learned about and putting them into one spreadsheet. But I think this looks great. I'll choose, let's say, Paula. How much did Paula make in pants? And there we go. We have an awesome functioning worksheet here. And we've used named ranges. If you ever need to change a named range, always remember you can go to Formulas. And then once you're in Formulas, go to Name Manager. And you can change those, delete them, whatever you like. It'll even showcase exactly what you're looking at. And you'll notice that anytime you create a named range, like the 5% bonus, it automatically adds those dollar signs because it automatically absolute references it. I hope you enjoyed this. Try it out on your own, and then we'll go through some more fun stuff when you get back. The next thing we're going to talk about are pivot tables. Pivot tables are very useful when you have to analyze massive amounts of data or answer questions about massive amounts of data. Let's take, for instance, this Pear Creamery sales. I have some simplistic data here, the month, the year, the type, the salesperson, region, sales, and units. And my boss keeps asking me about how much did we make total in sales? How much did each salesperson make total? How much did each salesperson make in each region? How much did each salesperson make in each type of ice cream? How much did we make each month? As you can see, that could get a little overwhelming with questions. But pivot tables, the word pivot means turn, we can quickly exchange the columns and the rows to turn towards the next question. So if we're asked a question, we can pivot to the next one and pivot to the next one. That's going to allow us to answer questions more effectively and efficiently. So how do we turn it into a pivot table? Well, the first thing we're going to do is select all of our data. Once you select your data, you can then go over to the Insert tab, and inside of this Insert tab, we're going to click on the Pivot Table command. It's one of the first commands there. Once we click on this command, it'll tell us that we're selecting this pivot table from this table. It's called Table 1, or if you named it something different, it'll say your table name there. And I recommend that you choose New Worksheet. That way this doesn't get put in the middle of existing data. So with a new worksheet, we're fresh. With a new worksheet, we don't have to worry about messing up old data. Once we click on OK, you're going to see that it puts our new pivot table in this sheet 1. Now what I like about this is that right away we see our pivot table. There's not much on it because, well, it's blank, but that's still a pivot table. Not only do we see a blank pivot table, but we also have access to 2 new tabs, the Analyze tab and the Design tab. So these tabs are going to start to help us to, well, analyze and design our pivot tables. One of the biggest things that you'll see here is the pivot table fields, and this is where all of our data lives. You'll see our fields, month, year, type, salesperson, region, sales, and units. And you may remember those fields as the headers in our original data. That's because they are. All of our data gets pushed into the headers. So essentially, if I go back to our raw data, you'll see that all of the months are being pushed into month, all of the years into year, all of the type into type, and so on and so forth. That's where all our data lives now, is inside of the headers known as fields on our pivot table. Now, where do we actually drag these fields to start building out the pivot table? Well, in these areas below. And actually, the way Microsoft designed this was pretty genius. If we look at columns, for instance, where do columns go? Well, columns go across our columns, column F, G, H, I, J, K, L. If we look at rows, where do rows go? Well, rows go down our rows, like row 3 all the way to row 23. And if we look at values, well, values has that numeric symbol there. You'll see the little symbol for mathematics. And what goes here are numbers. Now, of course, you could put non-numeric values there, but mostly in the values, you put numeric values, things like sales or units. And that will build the data for our table. So essentially, what is a pivot table? It's just a table. We also have the option to add filters as well. And these filters work the same way the filters work in normal tables. It'll add a little filter drop down, just like that. Let's answer the first question. Our boss asked us, how much did we make total in sales? So I know I'm dealing with sales, and since sales is a number, I know exactly where to put it, in the values. And I'll click and drop it there. Now it doesn't look really that good as a currency there, so I'll just change the formatting, and you do that the same way you normally change. And I'll choose currency. And that looks great. So now that we have this, what we can do is we can start to build out the rest of the question. So we have the total sales, but the next question was, how much should each salesperson make? So I'm going to know that I'm using salesperson. I already have sales there in the values. So the biggest thing is, where do I put salesperson? It's really important to note, it doesn't really matter where you put this. If you put it into columns, it's going to show Alex, Nicole, and Paul across the columns. If you take salesperson and put it into the rows, it shows Alex, Nicole, and Paul going down the rows. And if you take salesperson and put it into the filters, it just creates a drop-down filter for Alex, Nicole, and Paul. So you can quickly see that all you're doing here is changing the look of your pivot table. As long as you remember to put fields here that are non-numeric, and you put your numeric values here, you'll always be able to build a table with accurate data. If you do something like this, well, that's not really displaying much for me. I don't know exactly who made the most or anything for that matter. It's just giving me raw data. Or if I did something like this, same thing. It's just giving me the raw data. If I want to put it into the values, it's summing it up and it's doing an aggregate. You can click the drop down and choose other aggregates as well. It doesn't have to be the sum of sales. You can go to value field settings and you could do the count of sales, the average, the max, the min, the product, or even other ones like standard deviation. But for me, sum works perfect. Next up, they asked, how much should each salesperson make in each region? Okay, so I take region and I put it into columns. And look at that, I automatically get the answer. Now my boss did ask me, Joe, why did Paul only make 52,000? One of the best things about a pivot table is that you can actually drill down on the data. So for instance, if they want to report about Paul's central sales, I could double click and it creates a whole new sheet, puts it as a table format, and I can see all of Paul's central sales. Now all I have to do is just rename the sheet. I'll call it Paul's central sales, and there we go. I can go back to my pivot table at any time. You can do that for anything on the pivot table. So if I want to see the total for West sales, double click, and now we have all the West sales from all the 3 sales reps. And I'll just call that West sales. Now I'll go into sheet 1 again, and now what I can do is answer the next question. And the next question was, how much should each salesperson make in each type of ice cream? So for this one, I'll probably remove region. And you'll see I just clicked and dragged it off to the worksheet, and I'll take type and replace it. Now I know how much each sales rep made in each type of ice cream. The next one was, how much did we make in each month? So I can remove everything except for sales and see each month. I can even add in here units if I wanted to see how many units we sold. Now if the units come over as a numeric value, just select it and change it back to a general currency or a general number so that it's not a currency, just like this. And I think that looks great. So as you can see, pivot tables are really great at answering and analyzing data. You can quickly change between columns and rows to see different types of data and answer questions. Not only that, you can also pivot and drill down on the data afterwards. The next function we're going to talk about is called XLOOKUP. This function allows you to find a value in a range of cells and then retrieve a corresponding value from another column or row. It offers advantages over traditional lookups like VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP or even index and match because it allows you to look left to right and you don't have limitations like you have to use the most left column or they have to be in ascending order. So that's really great. So the first thing we're going to do here is let's say that we have these 3 different tables and it has a bunch of information. This first table has the products and how much each one is worth. The second table has the sales rep and what each region is. And then the third table has the date, the sales rep, the product, and then how many units were sold. Now what I was tasked with is analyzing this data. But it's very hard for me to continuously try to figure out what the price is and say, oh, doublers, oh, 79. Or who is the sales rep? Christy, where did they sell it? Christy in the West. Instead, wouldn't it be nicer if I had all of that data in one table? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to use XLOOKUP to grab the data from these 2 tables and then incorporate them in this one. So I'm going to just create 2 more here. And these 2 columns are going to be price and region. I'll then just do a little bit of formatting here. I do want it to look really nice here. So I'm just going to take these 2 and I want to add in some borders. There we go. So now that I have this, the next thing is I have to pull the price from that price table. So essentially what XLOOKUP is going to do is it's going to say, okay, we're going to look for doublers, and we're going to look for that in this list of products. Once we find it, we'll return the price. And that's all you need for this to work. I'm going to select my lookup value, where am I looking for it, and what do I want to return? So let's do it. I'm going to do equals XLOOKUP. I'm going to select my lookup value, which is doublers, put a comma. Where am I looking for the word doublers? In this list of data, put a comma. And what do you want to return? The prices. That's it. No longer do we need to do index numbers and column index and choose which one we need. Is it going to be a certain match mode? It's automatically an exact match with XLOOKUP. Now all we have to do is just add in our dollar signs here, or you could use named ranges like we just did before. But I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut, which is F4 on my keyboard, the function key F4, and it will automatically put those dollar signs in, and I'll press enter. Now I have the price. I can double click to autofill, and there it is. Last thing I may do is just change it to a currency, and look how amazing that looks. We'll do it again with region equals XLOOKUP. And if you're new to formulas or functions, after you type in equals XLOOKUP and you press tab on the keyboard to open the parentheses, remember you can always go up to the FX in your formula bar and you can get the help box or the function arguments box. You'll see that there's many different arguments, but those are all optional. The three main ones you need are all bold. Lookup value, where are you looking it up? Lookup array, what do you want to return? Return array. That's it. So for this one, what are we looking up? Well, we want the region. So we have the region here. We're going to look up the sales rep. So I'm going to click on Christy Olson, H2. Where am I looking for Christy's name? In this list, I'm going to use Control-Shift down arrow in this list of sales reps. I'll just add in my dollar signs here using my F4 keyboard shortcut. What do I want to return? The region. So I'll select all my regions. Once again, use that keyboard shortcut to put in the dollar signs. Click OK, and look at that. Now we just do an autofill, and it works beautifully. So as you can see, XLOOKUP is an amazing function. It replaces VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and it has many other advantages as well. The next thing we're going to talk about is Power Query. Power Query is such a powerful data transformation tool and also a querying tool in Excel. It allows you to import, manipulate, and also transform data from different sources. It's also very user-friendly, and it's used for just performing data cleaning or shaping or merging data. So you'll see here that we have data, and this data was imported from a database. Now, typically when you import data from a database, it does need some cleaning up. As you can see here, we have some things that are fully capitalized, some are fully lowercase, and there's a lot of white spacing as well. So I don't want to do this manually. I want to clean this up in Power Query. The first thing we're going to do is go to the Data tab. And once you're in the Data tab, you'll then go over to the Get and Transform Data command group and choose from Table or Range. Now, if your data is in a range format, no worries. It will just force you to turn it into a table first before loading it into the Power Query editor. Now, since mine's already a table, I could just click into it and select from Table or Range. It's going to pull you into the Power Query editor, and just like anything else, you'll see it's very Microsoft feel, right? We have here the ribbon, and we have different tabs, and we have all the different commands. Now, one thing to note in Power Query Editor, there is no undo button. So if you delete something by accident, let's say I remove this column for first name, and I'm like, oops, I didn't mean to do that. If you try to do Control Z or find undo, you won't find it. In Power Query Editor, instead what they do is they follow what steps you have taken in this query. You'll see the remove columns here, and next to it is a little X. That is your undo button. If you click the little X, it will undo what change you just made. So with that said, let's start to clean up this data so it looks beautiful again. First thing is I don't really need the ID, so I can right-click and remove that column. For the other three, I do want to take care of the capitalization problem. So I'm going to select each one by holding down the Control key, or you can just click Title, hold the Shift key, and click on Last Name to go all the way through the selection. Then I can right-click, and I can choose to transform this data. Now they have different ways to transform it, whether you want to make all the words lowercase or uppercase, or capitalize each word, which I want to capitalize. And there we go, it fixed that problem immediately. The next thing I'm going to do is right-click again, choose Transform, and this time I'm going to use what's known as Trim. What this does is it trims all the white space out. And look at that, it looks great already. So now we fixed the capitalization, we fixed the white spacing. The last thing I want to do is I want to merge these three columns together. Now you can do that by right-clicking, and you'll see Merge Columns. I want to merge them just to be all in one column for a full name effect. So I'm going to select it. It's going to ask me what is the separator that you want for the name. Well, I want it to be Mr. space Steve space Savala. So the separator is going to be just a space, but you could choose hyphens or semicolons or equal sign, but I'm going to choose space here. I'm then going to name it full name and click OK. And now it looks beautiful. The last thing we need to do is just go to the Home tab and click Close and Load. It'll have your original, and then it'll also have the new and improved data. So we just went from this to this within a couple of seconds. The next example I want to showcase is the Power Query example 2 here, where I have my data and then I have a bunch of stores. Let's say my boss says to me, Joe, this looks good, but how I want it to look is I want it to be like this. Instead of the stores being on one row, I want them on multiple rows. So for that first one, I want it to be 1/1/2018 and then 1003. And then I want the next one to be 1/1/2018 1012. So you want me to split this one row into two. You want me to split this one row into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Well, that's a lot that I have to go through. So instead of that, what I can do is I can load this into the Power Query, and then I can make Power Query do all of the transformation for me. So once again, I'll just click into my table, go to Data tab, go to From Table/Range. I'm going to first off change the date because it came over with the time as well. You'll see here the little clock and that little calendar for the date. I don't want date and time. Instead, I'll click on that and I'll choose the format to just be date. And I'll say yes, replace. Now it looks cleaner. The next thing I have to do is split this column. And you'll notice in the Home tab, they have an option called Split Column. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to say by delimiter. A delimiter can be a space, a colon, a semicolon, a comma, and we can see here we have a semicolon. So I'm going to click on delimiter, and it will automatically guess it for you, but it's always good to double check. So now I have split by semicolon. But what I want to do is go into advanced options, because what it's doing right now is it's going to split it into other columns. It's going to split it into 11 other columns when really I want to split it into rows. I'm going to select rows, click OK, and look how awesome that is. It did all the work for me, and now all I need to do is close and load. So we went from this to this. As you can see, Power Query has so many different features, whether it's importing data or doing data transformation or just editing or cleaning and shaping the data. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope you got a lot out of this course. We've talked about so many different tips and tricks in Excel. Let me know in the comments which one was your favorite. Thank you all and have a great day.